See this nondescript building sitting next door to a small electronics shop? Those are the offices of A24, an independent film and TV distribution and production company. Now, this is just a sample of A24's films nominated for this year's Oscar ceremony.
Hong Chow, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Stephanie Hsu.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. Ryan Tyree Henry. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Everything Everywhere All at Once.
And The Whale.
Ki Hui Kwan. And This Is a Life. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Brendan Fraser in The Whale. Paul Mescal in After Sun.
And Michelle Yeoh.
So how did such a small company, founded just 10 years ago, manage to reach and even surpass mammoth film companies that have been around for over a century? And will A24 manage to maintain their unique approach to the business? What will happen in their future? The majority of us weren't around when major film studios were founded. Universal, Paramount, Disney, Warner Bros, MGM, 20th Century Studios, and most of the big names we're all familiar with have been around for about 100 years. And they've had time to ride their highs, figure out how to rise from their lows, find their money making gems, and establish themselves in the business. Disney could be selling cow dung just because it has their name slapped on it. That's how well established they are.
Looks like some sort of fairy magic.
So when it comes to making films, these companies can get their hands on huge names. The best directors, actors, effects companies, composers, the best marketing and publicity. They dominate the industry. There have of course been smaller and independent companies popping up over the years, which have given us great films. For example, Annapurna, which released award-winning movies like Zero Dark 30, American Hustle, Her, Vice. Blumhouse quickly became established for its horror movies like the Paranormal Activity and Insidious franchises, Us, Black Phone, The Purge, Get Out. But many smaller companies are often subsidiaries of larger companies, or at some point throughout the years were bought by larger companies. It's a little like Nestle that owns basically everything. Universal owns DreamWorks, Illumination, Peacock. Paramount owns Nickelodeon and Miramax, and Disney is the best example, owning basically everything they can get their hands on.
Get back!
So in this environment, it's very hard for a small, independent, newly founded film studio to successfully establish itself without entering some sort of deal with the majors. But that's where A24 stepped in and went from making lesser known, badly reviewed dark comedies like A Glimpse Inside the Mind of Charles Swan III to multiple award-winning, highly praised films like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is currently nominated for 11 Oscars. To put things in perspective, Titanic was nominated for 14. It is nominated for the same amount of categories as The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. But A24's current success isn't only tied to Everything Everywhere All at Once. This year's film awards season has seen a huge presence of their films. The Whale has been showered in awards and nominations, same for After Sun, which many have voted as Best Film of the Year, The Inspection, Causeway, they're everywhere. And A24 has competed against these huge majors I was mentioning earlier, and they were founded just 10 years ago. They didn't have a century to prepare. So how did this all happen, and will it last? Many people have tried to pinpoint exactly what makes A24 so successful, and I think it comes down to a combination of different factors. First of all, memorability and trust in the brand. A24 are behind around 100 films and a handful of series, and nearly all their titles have some impactful element. They tend to stick with you. There might be a huge plot twist, or a really, really weird story, a famous actor in an odd role, peculiar cinematography, or even just a really bad plot that you'll always remember. They rarely have gone forward with plain dramas or predictable and thus forgettable stories. There have been some titles even recently like Stars at Noon, which were incredibly underwhelming, but overall you will remember an A24 film, whether it may be the story of a guy doing the deed with a horse, or a woman ending up in a weird deadly cult in Sweden, Shia LaBeouf selling door to door, or the depressing story of a ghost dressed exactly like a stereotypical ghost. We've seen people turned into animals if they don't find a partner, Jake Gyllenhaal seeing giant spiders, Paul Dano befriending a corpse, punk concert hostage situations, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson as lighthouse keepers, and weird human experiments with walruses. So in just 100 films, there's rarely been the usual run-of-the-mill story. And this, combined with all the awards they were receiving over the years, created the trust element and a very loyal fan base. While major film studios were founded 100 years ago, A24 was founded in 2012 when social media was exploding, and the company took on a very hands-on and unique approach to social media marketing. Over the years, it never felt like a big film studio just slapping on Twitter the poster for their upcoming film and listing all the big names casting it. A24 took a very unique approach and created a very specific, unique campaign for every film. Specific and peculiar peculiar merchandise isn't new to the business, but they will create some incredibly niche, specific, nearly Easter eggy merchandise, even for their smallest films. And now you can buy a butt plug candle for $60. There was even a time where they had charity auctions selling some very unique, rare, original props from the films, such as the main queen dress from Midsommar, or the Little Mermaid figurine from The Lighthouse, or Zendaya's hoodie from Euphoria. They have regular podcasts in which they will pair two very different people who have worked on A24 films, and you get these very unique combinations like Simon Rex and Angus Cloud, or that incredible episode where Ari Aster and Robert Eggers got together to talk about horror films. And speaking of Ari Aster, people love seeing talented artists grow and become successful from nothing. Ari Aster was basically nobody before pairing up with A24 and directing Hereditary and Midsommar, and we witnessed in real time him going from being that basically unknown name in the industry to being one of the most sought after horror directors working at the moment, and now everybody can't wait for his new film Boy Is Afraid. We even saw Jonah Hill's and Bo Burnham's first films as directors, so people love how this company doesn't feel too far away from them. They love seeing their favourite actors and directors casually chatting about their lives, their stories, their experiences. They love looking at the meme format posts. They love supporting the more indie side of the industry. And the fan base is now made of people who are willing to pay $35 plus shipping for a rock with googly eyes on it. And yes, it's sold out. A hoodie with their logo on can cost you $80. A gingerbread house set, $62. Their beach towel is $45, and some products are only available to their A24 program, which is a membership program by which you get exclusive access to some of their content. We have to admit it, there aren't that many people walking around with a Paramount Pictures water bottle or a Columbia Pictures dog leash. This is the kind of foundation Disney managed to achieve. Of course, the resources aren't comparable. The majors have their own theme parks, they have physical shops all over the world selling their merchandise, but this all created an incredibly strong trust in the A24 brand. People will watch their films just because there is their name attached to it. This is something that happens with Pixar or Marvel, but it all developed in just 10 years. This love for the brand might also stem from the desire for, allow me to put it like this, something different in this oversaturated and predictable industry. As director Alex Garland put it, I think what they've understood is there's a sufficient number of people out there who want more challenging or different material, and they're aiming at them. Which is incredibly cheesy and pick-me material, but it's true. I personally am more curious to figure out what on earth that Joaquin Phoenix is going through in Beau is Afraid, rather than the 30th film in a never-ending franchise. Some have said that this adoration for A24 comes off a little as a cult of the brand. And I myself have to admit that I've been guilty in the past of praising just A24 and not the names, the filmmakers, the actors who actually made the film. So reflecting on things, it comes down to appreciating the people who worked on the films, and A24 for being the platform bringing them in the spotlight. And I personally think it's common sense to think a $95 blanket might be a little overpriced. And speaking of the artists, another element that made A24 so successful is this, I don't really know how to put it, but the A24 vibe, which is so recognizable that people have been making lists of films that feel like A24 movies. It's very hard to pinpoint what it is, as the aesthetic of their films vary from the craziness of Climax to the modern look of Ex Machina to the slow pace of First Cow, which yes, is the story of a cow. I think the peculiar element, that vibe, is that most A24 stories are often told from a peculiar perspective and often from lesser known artists. Except for some cases like Sean Baker or the Safdie brothers, Alex Garland, most of the people working on these films are pretty much unknown. So while you might immediately recognize a Wes Anderson or a Tarantino film, you will be taken aback by the idea Valdemar Johansson came up with for Lamb, the sweaty, anxious look Owen Klein gave to Funny Pages, the creepiness of Rose Glass's St. Maud. You will see famous actors outside their usual roles, like Scarlett Johansson as a seductive alien in Under the Skin, a pretty serious and anxiety-fueled Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, Daniel Radcliffe as a corpse in Swiss Army Man. The topics vary from evil dresses taking over their owner to Korean immigrants trying to set up a successful farm in California, from journeys to China to visit dying grandmas to Orthodox Jewish recently widowed men trying to get by, from Irish fish militiamen trying to hide secrets from their community to Ethan Hawke as a priest. You see the perspective of sex workers, obsessed climate activists, army veterans, depressed parents, families struggling with addicted loved ones, prison gangs, and even animated shells. And these peculiar visions don't need to fit in the requirements, the parameters of a big film studio. There's also the issue of many film companies now trying to dodge as many bullets as possible, trying to play it as safe as possible. And that's how you end up with some disasters like The Matrix Resurrection, which was so blatantly trying to play it as safe as possible, be as lucrative as possible, and was a mess. Even A24 has fallen into this trap. Remember what happened recently with Men, which was such a weird and forced narrative about how men are just inherently bad.
No. Mustn't do that.
But overall, their films have covered the weird and bad side of all sorts of topics with no excuses. I'm even sure a film like Prayer Before Dawn would be considered offensive now because there is an awful depiction of Thailand's prison system. Lately, I've had the feeling that many films are starting to feel just like a big advertisement or a business deal. So it's refreshing to hear that many actors, directors, crew members who have worked through A24 have agreed that it never really felt like reaching a deal with a businessman. Of course, everybody's in it even to make money, but at least it never felt like watching an obvious advertisement for the company. So essentially, wrapping it up, many A24 films gain so much popularity because they're usually surprising with unexpected themes, twists, cinematography and aesthetic, because they're made by a variety of small and lesser known artists. They also often feature one big name, like a big actor, who will get them some more traction. They are then guerrilla marketed online and people are caught in the loop of trust in the brand, and it is very in to watch an A24 film, buy the merch and so on. And this all led to progressively larger budgets and bigger box office revenue, peaking now with the crazy worldwide success of films like Everything Everywhere All at Once. How will this continue, and is it sustainable in the long run? Will the company be able to maintain their unique approach to the business in a world in which you can switch on Netflix and you have everything possible to feast your eyes upon, or in which Warner Bros has an X times larger advertisement budget? I've thought of different outcomes. The first one is the company being bought by a larger one. I don't think that's very likely because A24 focuses a lot on their uniqueness, and going under another company would mean adapting to their parameters, their standards. We've seen this happen very recently with the brands that Disney bought. I think it's more likely we will see more and more partnerships. On the contrary of many major film studios, A24 doesn't have its own streaming platform and has to rely on deals with Apple TV, Amazon, and even Netflix recently with White Noise. So I expect maybe more partnerships with them, which will then lead to bigger budgets, bigger productions. And I think they need this because many people came across A24 very recently and expect their expectations to be surpassed. If you, like me, came across A24 back in the days of Spring Breakers, The Bling Ring, films like Everything Everywhere All at Once are masterpieces.
I still believe.
But if you're finding the company at this point, you will be expecting more. The company has already started to have more control over their work. Instead of acquiring films, if you look at the upcoming titles like Shown Up, Beau's Afraid, Maxine, they are nearly all produced by A24, whereas in the past they would often only distribute them. I also think A24 is going to try to increase even more the audience's affection for the brand. And I think another way they're going to do this is going to be by introducing recurring figures in their films. For example, with all the love Michelle Yeoh, Brendan Fraser and Ke Huy Quan are receiving, I definitely expect to see them return in other projects. They already have some established and recurring names like Robert Pattinson, Riley Keough, Ari Aster, Alex Garland, Lucas Hedges, Alexa Demie, and if you look at the upcoming projects, we see the return of Joaquin Phoenix, Robert Eggers, some of their most famous golden geese. For example, I'm sure more people are going to want to see more of Paul Mescal after Aftersun and God's Creatures.
No danger.
Another thing I could see happening is more sequels and sagas. Most A24 films are fine as standalone films. There's never really been the need for follow-ups or sequels. I think the first sequel was A Souvenir Part 2, which wasn't exactly necessary and it was a very quiet release. But now we have, for example, a full horror saga with the X, Pearl and Maxine trilogy. And with the success that franchises usually have, we could potentially see more of these in the future, which then again create a loyalty within the fans. We will also have to see whether the next year's Film Awards season will again be centered around A24 films. This year it was very trendy to talk about their films. The return of Brendan Fraser was a very big moment. An unconventional film like Everything Everywhere All at Once being nominated at the Oscars was such a turning point in the industry. Many of their films were all over the awards ceremonies, but I don't know if it will be like that every year. Not all of their films get that same attention. For example, now everybody's excited for Beau is Afraid, but mostly because there are two big names attached to it, Ari Aster and Joaquin Phoenix. But the trailers for Sharper, Showing Up, When You Finish Saving the World have also been released, but they didn't get that much attention. So we'll have to see how the next months and years evolve. Of course, now I'd love to hear your thoughts on all these topics, so make sure to leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a big like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.